Hello, we are Tim and Dana. We, with our son Josh and his wife and family, moved to north central Idaho for a quieter, more peaceful life. We are homesteading 30 acres of totally undeveloped off grid land. We are putting in wells and driveways. We are building cabins, sheds, barns, and houses. We are making pens for pigs, chickens, and dogs. Tim calls it our chicken bacon ranch. I call it Idahome off-grid. This is Josh's first set of piglets. He started raising them before we had moved into our shed. But they're so cute. We do go out and visit them once in a while. Josh goes out and feeds them twice a day, feeds and waters them twice a day, and he checks on them regularly, so they're perfectly fine. He's hoping to raise pigs to sell. He bought 10 of them this first time just to see how things go, and we will get half a pig once they're raised and old enough to process, but that'll be part of the income for the farm. Josh's well got dug today. They went 300 feet deep, and it is 50 gallons per minute.
This is Josh. What you see here is a picture of our well casing and our RPS solar pump. The solar pump was easy to install. There were easy instructions to follow, etc. RPS Solar is where we got it. I set up a post to hold up the solar array, and because our soil is only about 9 inches to a foot deep before you hit rock, I ended up just putting a post in as deep as I could and then adding some supports. I'm always a little cautious about wind around here, so that's why I did it with a tripod like that. You can see there's a charge controller on the post, and it came with solar panels that hook into the charge controller, and so when the sun shines on the solar panels, the pump is powered. Our pump is about 125 feet down. There's instructions on how to set it up. It came with a complete kit. All I had to buy was a pitless adapter. The pitless adapter goes into the well casing below the level of the soil to prevent the pipe from freezing. So that did not come with my kit. But other than that, everything I needed to install the pump as well as the panels and the controller, it all came included. So that was cool and relatively easy. We could do it with 2 people. We were able to hook up the pump and lower it down with 2 people, no problem. One thing we were really careful about was any heat shrink, waterproofing of the wires that needed to be done. I also tied a nylon rope to the pump just in case for some reason it came loose from the pipe, so it wouldn't fall down to the bottom of our well, which overall is 300 feet deep. We have a static level of about 90 feet, which is kind of nice, but it does make me wonder what's going on there. So hopefully at some point I don't have to make the well any deeper. That's kind of it for the solar pump portion. It was easy. It comes with step-by-step instructions. It seemed reasonably priced. I think overall it was as much as buying like a Grundfos pump, if I remember right. It was very reasonable. They're easy to work with, etc., etc., etc. So there you go. This is Josh again. You're looking at our solar racking, the framing for our solar panels. And before I start, I'd like to just put in a disclaimer. I'm not a professional. You should consult a professional if you need help with your solar setup. This is just informational purposes only, so don't take my word for anything. That being said, this is my framing. I use 6x6s and 2x6s for bracing. I really didn't want it to the posts to warp, which is why I went with 6x6 instead of 4x4. I put them in concrete on saddles in the concrete, and I really was worried about wind. Here, wind is a factor. that unistrut you see here, that's what that metal is that spans across. So we put our solar panels at a 45-degree angle and used unistrut. That's what we're going to attach the panels to, using clips that slide into that unistrut and have a bolt that go into them. With the unistrut, it's pretty bendy. I found that out. So in the wind, with all those panels on it, it was moving quite a bit. So I put in a middle brace at the end of the day. Not at the end of the day, but before I put the panels into service. What you see here is a combiner box, a Midnight Solar combiner box. All the panels run into that box, which combines everything into, so you can put it through one wire to get it to the solar charge controller. Here I'm struggling with those clips, so you have to slide the clips into the unistrut, and then actually the bolts for the clips were too big for the solar panel holes, so I ended up drilling out every single hole in each solar panel so that I could get these bolts through the hole. And when I did that, it made it so that I had to align the clips perfectly with the hole in order to get the bolt through and into the clip. So it was a really tight squeeze for my fingers, and to get a wrench in there. You can see me here, I'm kind of trying to muscle the panels around to get them to line up, get the holes to line up with the clip. I could have drilled out the hole a tiny bit bigger, or I could have thought of a better system. Overall, I'd recommend the Unistrut system. It was a little difficult to get the bolts in and to get them tightened, but it works well. So if there's a better way, look for it, find it. But that's what I used, and so far it's held up in the wind. Like I said, see how floppy it is there? That middle brace really helps hold it stable. And I would recommend probably not spanning, I don't know, not spanning more than what? I mean, I think this span is like a 10-foot span. I didn't mean for that to happen. I did my calculations wrong because I'm stupid. But I'd recommend not more than a 5 or 6 foot span on this Unistrut probably. So these angles, this was a 45-degree angle, and that's where I messed up my measurement. I actually figured a different angle to start, and then I changed my angle later. And so I set my concrete, did my posts without rechecking my new drawings. And I ended up actually with a span that's about 1.5 feet longer than I wanted. But even so, I think I would have needed a middle brace. But I was hoping the end of the solar panels would cover the exposed ends of the post. So all I did with the posts is I cut an angle on them, so it lessened the chance of them rotting over time. And I did use all pressure treated materials. With pressure treated materials, it's good to keep in mind you need special fasteners that don't degrade in the pressure treated in the chemicals that they use. So as you're attaching your Unistrut and such, make sure you're buying appropriate fasteners for that. Also, don't skimp on the size of the fasteners for attaching everything. I didn't just use screws, I actually used leg type screws, those new leg type screws to attach to the 2x6s and all that to the framing. Screws over time, they just get weak and they just snap. I found this out actually with the middle bracing that I ended up putting in later. So a word to the wise, screws have a lot of weaknesses. But you can see me there struggling to get that bolt tight. Another word of warning, it can be difficult to do this, but like I said, totally possible. At the end of the day, I got it done. It didn't take super long, and here we are with solar panels. Boom. And so far they've done great in the wind. So from the panels, the electricity goes through wires that are multi-stranded. I wanted multi-stranded based on stuff I was reading. I know you can use 10 gauge PV wire, but we had a run that was just slightly longer than I thought would be safe for that amount of voltage or wattage going through the wires, amperage and voltage. So, and I was looking at a Southwire voltage drop calculator to figure out my wire size. So I ended up ordering some wire from the lumberyard. They ordered it from an electrical company for me. So I probably paid more than I had to, but that's the way I roll. So we ran that to the shop. We have a solar room in the shop. It's an insulated room that's designed to keep the batteries warm. And we have a refrigerator and a freezer in there, and that actually, with the inverter, produces enough heat to keep it above freezing most of the time. We also have a light in there we can leave on, and then when things get really bad, what I do is I turn on my generator and hook an electric heater up to heat up the room. briefly for maybe an hour or so. This is the inverter you're looking at. I got an old Victron system. It's hooked to a fuse there. I ordered it from Backwoods Solar. They basically gave me everything I needed, and they gave me a schematic to follow that I followed. It was intimidating for me. I kind of have a natural tendency to overanalyze things, but once I got started and figured out how wire sizes worked and stuff, it worked out well. I would recommend looking at Current Connected. They do carry many different types of battery cables and stuff, or any website. You can make your own battery cables if you want. I personally didn't feel like accidentally messing that up, so I did order from Backwoods Solar. I tried to make my own, and it was a failure. So we used Victron charge controllers. Those take the power from the panels, from the combiner box. So the panels hook into the combiner box. So all the wiring from the panels come together, and they hook into breakers in the combiner box. The combiner box hooks all that, or combines all that power into one string, or you can run it through one line, so you have a hot, or whatever the DC terms are, positive and negative, I guess. So we ran it through that one wire from the combiner box into the charge controller. So it goes from panels to the combiner box. So the combiner box, we ran the panels in a series. I think we had series of 3. So those 3 different leads came into the combiner box, and then they all combined together into one. So all the voltages and amperages add up, depending on what's in series and what's in parallel. The other thing is, then what happens is it goes from the combiner box through the wire that we bought from the lumberyard and runs into the solar room, and we have charge controllers set up. Those charge controllers take that power and they charge the battery. They sense what the battery needs, basically, and charge the battery accordingly. From the battery, then, you go to the inverter using these big battery cables. The inverter takes the DC power from the battery and converts it into AC, or inverts it into AC power, which goes then from the inverter. You take the AC power, hook it up into your main panel, your electrical panel. In that system, you can put things like switches. You need things like fuses, which we installed fuses. We actually don't have any switches. It's inconvenient. I just didn't order any, and I wish I would have. I would recommend getting switches. I would recommend getting shunts to help you combine any wiring that you need to combine, rather than putting a bunch of terminals on, or a bunch of the ring ends on the battery cables onto the same terminal. I would recommend getting a shunt, so you can connect them all individually to their own terminal, and then it all comes together into one wire. The switches would be handy for just shutting off, like the batteries, to work on stuff like that. I would also recommend getting something to monitor your state of charge. The batteries generally will come with something that tells you the state of charge, but it's usually pretty inaccurate, pretty rough. Victron makes one, which I actually purchased. I just haven't installed it because I haven't wanted to shut down my power and get into all that right now. So I'd recommend those things. It is overall, our system is about as basic as you can get. There's a combiner box, takes all the wiring from the panels, sends it into one wire that goes to the charge controller. So this charge controller combiner box, that goes to the batteries, charges the batteries. From the batteries, we go to the inverter through a fuse. So it goes through a fuse both ways, actually. So the combiner box has a fuse, the charge controllers have a fuse, and the inverter has a fuse. From the battery to inverter, we have it going to the panel, and it's just very basic. So actually, it being so basic made it hard for me to find information online for how to set it up. But it's possible. I got there. So if you're gonna do it, you can do it. Like I said, I'm not an expert. Don't take my advice for anything, but at least you know somebody like me who's just a drywaller can do something like this. The other thing I'd say is when you're buying, or when you're thinking about your inverter, we ended up getting an inverter that only does 120 volts. It's a single phase output, and I'd recommend just doing a split phase at the outset. It'd be more convenient for wiring your system, and the only downfall might be if you end up getting ambitious about how much power you can use off your battery, and you end up hooking an oven or something into your power or a hot water heater. Uh, Big users of power do draw down your batteries quickly, so just be aware of that. We ended up going with propane for all the big power uses like oven, dryer, water heater, and also a supplemental heater for the cabin. Um, yeah, I think that's about all I have for you. Hopefully it's helpful. And if you do solar, oh yeah, the other thing you'll need is a generator to supplement on cloudy days. And that generator, we have it hooked right to the inverter. It senses when the generator is running. So we just bought a wire that was the appropriate size for the wattage, for the amps and the volts running through the wire. We bought a just electrical wire, and we made a plug that plugged into the generator, takes the power from there, puts it right to the inverter. And so the inverter senses when the generator is running and takes the generator power, and the inverter sends that to the batteries to charge the batteries. So I think that's about it. I hope it's helpful. I know I missed stuff, but we did it. It's possible.
A few days later, a neighbor called to say the creek had flooded over the driveway. We went out as soon as we could and saw this. The creek was way over its banks and over 20 feet wide in some places. It washed some of the rocks around the culverts away. My niece and I walked out across the culverts to make sure it was still sturdy. And it was. So we can drive over it, but it'll take a while to fix. I'm sure Tim has a good plan for it. Psalm 19:1 says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork." Thanks for watching. Have a good day.